You know, one of the things that kind of always bothers me on YouTube is when if you say anything negative about something, someone will always come back and say, well, this channel reviewed the product and they said all good things. And I have to say to them, that person doesn't do reviews, they do presentations. And a lot of people don't understand what that means. So I wanted to talk today a little bit about what I think are the different types of gun channels. Gun channels can be many different things. We're not all the same. And I think there's something you can use to remember what different types of gun channels there are out there. And it's PAMS. No, that's not something you need to delete from your browser history so your spouse doesn't think you're a pervert. It's an acronym. And it's an acronym I use to remember like what I think the different types of gun channels are. And it starts off with P, presenters. And then it's E, entertainers. Another E for educators. C for critics, A for activists, M for marks, and then S for shills. And all of those things are something gun channels can be. Gun channels don't always fall into one of those categories. They usually fall into multiple of those categories. Usually they're primarily one or the other, but they can take a little bit from all of them. And there's only one of them that's really can be negative, and that's the last one, shills. But we'll get to that one in a few minutes. First, let's start with the P, the presenters. Well, what is a presenter? Well, a presenter is someone that shows you a product. They say, here's the product, here's the specs, here's an example of it working in the field or whatever they want to do with it, or they just tear it down and show you the pieces. That's a presenter. Now, presenters will often give you a little bit of an opinion, but it's never really that in-depth. And usually it's very positive. Presenters usually don't get too negative. Mainly because a lot of people don't like to get negative, or there's really no good in getting too negative because it really doesn't do anybody any good. Just from a standpoint of wanting to keep things rolling. They want to keep stuff coming in to do reviews of, and if you don't say good things about products, they stop sending you stuff. So you got to kind of play the game. And there is a game to play in this industry, believe it or not. So presenters are people that, you know, they serve a very valuable purpose. They show you the new stuff. And because they're willing to just show it to you and not give you too critical of a review of it, most companies are willing to send them that stuff on a loaner program, let them show it to you. So therefore, they get more stuff they can show you. Presenters are one of the biggest parts of YouTube, and they're one of the most important things on YouTube because they allow you to see what you want to see. And it's up to you to determine how valuable what they say is. Presenters, like I say, they don't usually give you anything too in-depth. A lot of times they don't even own the gun. And if you don't own a gun, you can't really give a really strict review of it or a really critical review of it because you don't have it long enough. So those are presentations, and most channels fall under this, like Military Arms Channel, that's mostly presentation. Suits, that's mostly presentation. They do give you their opinions, but they're not really, like I said, borne out critical opinions of these items. They just often don't have them long enough. Then you have entertainers. Entertainers are people like 22 Plinkster and Matt V. Those are entertainers. I mean, you watch them, it's entertaining. You're not there to learn anything. You're there to have a laugh or be like, wow, how do they do that? You know, that's the kind of channel they do. And those are awesome. Those are some of the most popular channels because, like I say, people want to be entertained. So they get a lot of traffic. They're awesome. Plus, they bring a lot of people in to guns because it's entertaining, like I said. Hickok is one of these. People will often say to me, well, Hickok reviewed this gun. I'm like, Hickok doesn't review guns. He's a presenter and an entertainer. He falls into those two categories. You watch Hickok because of Hickok. If it was somebody else doing it, you'd be like, this boring as fuck. And you wouldn't watch it. You watch it because of him, the entertainment value of him as a person presenting these firearms. And like I said, those are probably some of the most important channels as far as spreading the word and getting more people involved in guns because they get a wide audience, people get interested, they get entertained, and they pay attention. Next, you have educators. Now, anybody from any category can be an educator. Anytime you do a how-to video, that's an educational video. Anytime you do a video on, you know, just like, hey, here's some information about politics, that's informational, that's educational. So a lot of channels can be educational, but there's some channels that are just primarily educational material. Channels that do things like, hey, here's how you install this site. Here's how you clean this gun. Here's how you do that. Or, here's the history of this weapon. Like, forgotten weapons. I consider them educational because you're looking at old guns you'd probably never see before, or that you would never see if they didn't show it to you. Things like that. They're actually educating you on something. Education can be history, mechanics, whatever. Educational channels I find very interesting because I like to find out this stuff and I like to work on guns, so I like to see the mechanical things. So I love educational channels. And I think all channels actually do a little bit of education. Then you get to the C. Now the C, this is what I consider my channel to be primarily, and that is critics. Critics are people that are critical, and critical doesn't mean negative. When you critique something, you can say the good and the bad. Everything has a little bad. Like I said before, a lot of presenters don't like to get into the bad. For one, it makes it harder for them to do business, and two, they just don't want to say negative things. Why? A lot of people are like, why bother with the negative? People will determine their own negative. Critics are like, some critics, you kind of got to like to point out the negative. You have to be very opinionated, and you have to have a real strong sense of what you want and what you don't want to be a real critic. I consider myself a critic. Channels like mine, Never Enough Ammo, he's a bit of a critic. So if you watch a critic's channel, here's a good way to tell if someone's a critic. If they never say anything bad about a gun, like Gun Blast, he's not a critic at all. He never says anything negative about a gun. He falls under the M I'll talk about a little bit later, I think. And there's nothing wrong with that either. But critics, if you watch a critic's channel, if they never say anything negative, they're not a critic. If you watch a critic's channel, you should know immediately. If someone says, hey, this channel, you should say like, oh, here's what they hate. They hate this, they hate that, they hate this, they hate that. They're very opinionated. If you can't say they're very opinionated and you know exactly what they hate, they're probably not a true critic. True critics are few and far between because it's one of the most expensive things to be, because it means you got to pretty much buy everything you want to show, because manufacturers are like, I don't want to give it to you because you're going to say nasty things about it if you don't like it. It's kind of like, remember Top Gear, the TV show about cars? Towards the end, their budget was enormous because they weren't being able to get stuff for free anymore. Because a lot of car companies are like, no, we're not giving you shit because you're just going to make fun of it. So that caused their budget to skyrocket, which was one of the things that they were so eager to cancel it when Jeremy Clarkson got in trouble, because they're like, we're spending so much money now, it's not even really profitable anymore. So critics, it's kind of hard to be a critic because it's expensive and you have to be opinionated, and you now have to not worry about what other people say. Because when you say something negative, you're going to piss off people and they're going to come back at you, and you have to either not care or you have to be able to go tit for tat with them, because being a critic is a thankless job. Now you move on to activists. And I also like to think my channel is a little bit of this too. Never Enough Ammo is a little bit of this too. I think I'm kind of 50-50 critic activist. Activists are people that want to speak their mind on the issues. Like when Springfield Armory screwed up, an activist will be like, here's what they did and it was wrong. Or when there's legislation that's anti-gun, they'll speak up against it. Activists want to keep you involved politically. They want to keep you involved socially. Activists have an agenda, and they want to share that agenda with you. Are you ready for it? That was a big activist channel there for a while. I don't know if they're still on the air or not, but they were a big activist channel for a while. Activist channels are very educational. The biggest difference between an educational channel and an activist, like I say, is they have an agenda. Like I have an agenda. I have a pro-Second Amendment agenda. So most of my activism, when I speak out about something or for or against, it's because I have a personal agenda as far as that topic is concerned. I have a personal bias. That's activists. Activists are very important. Activists are the ones that spread the word, I think. Activists are the ones that get more people involved and more people thinking about things deeper than just what caliber is it or how heavy is the trigger pull. They make you think about the actual issues of the Second Amendment, the actual issues of freedom, the actual issues of politics. So a lot of other channels shy away from this. You'll notice that most presenters, entertainers, educators, and even a lot of critics will shy away from activism completely, because you're going to alienate a lot of your audience when you become an activist, because there's going to be a lot of people that have a different opinion than yours or a different agenda than yours, or just don't want to hear it. They just want to see guns. Anytime you post a video that has any type of activist content, you hear people like, just stick to guns because they don't want to hear something that's, in opposition to what they believe. So most channels shy away from that because activism is bad for business. So far I'm like the two worst things for business, a critic and an activist. But luckily, no one takes me too seriously, so it's not that big of a deal. So activists are very important, like I say. To me, if I had to say which one's the most important, I actually think activists are most important because like I say, I have a bias towards that. So then after activists, you move on to the two last categories, the M and the S, the marks and the shills. Now, these aren't so much categories as they are flavors of the other categories. Marks, that's an old wrestling term for people that loved wrestling so much that they believed it was real. They really believed everything about it. And that applies to a lot of gun channels too. There are some gun channels that love everything gun. They don't think one negative thing about any gun. It's a gun, and that makes it awesome in its own right. They love everything. Like Gun Blast. He's a mark. He loves guns. Hickok kind of falls into that too. I think he really actually does love guns too. Never Enough Ammo. Not Never Enough Ammo, but gun websites. He sometimes falls into that because he will find the positive about everything. You give him a cheap Saturday night special, like an old Cobra or something, he'll find the positive in that gun. And it's not disingenuous, it's genuine. Marks are actually genuinely fond of everything. Like I say, they love everything. And we all know some marks as far as gun channels go. And there's nothing wrong with being a mark, unless you get to the point where you're so blatantly ignoring things that are dangerous, etc. But beyond that, being a mark is fine. It's actually fun. And boy, it's a really positive outlook because you like everything. So nothing wrong with being a mark. So now we get to the last category, shills. Shill is the only category that I think can be very negative, and in fact lends itself towards being a very negative category. Now, a shill isn't necessarily a bad thing. A shill can just be a salesman, just being an advertiser, someone who just says, okay, give me $50 and I'll do this, or give me $100 and I'll say this, or give me $200 and I'll make this video. That's a shill. It's an advertiser. And there's nothing wrong with that because, the world revolves around advertising. So if you know a channel, you're like, oh, they're just all commercials. I'm like, great. Because, like I said, the world revolves around advertising, and gun manufacturers and gun-related products, stuff like that, they are cut off from most advertising. CBS doesn't want to run commercials about guns. They don't want to be associated with that. So these companies have to find some way to get their word out. So these salespeople online, like I say, these channels, you're like, all they do is sales. Great, because they're filling that need. They're filling that need for the gun community, for gun manufacturers, for people who make silencers, for people who make, anything that you would consider part of the gun community. These salesmen are providing a very valuable service. And you don't fault, like CBS when they run a Ford commercial, and you don't say, oh, that's horrible that they're advertising Ford, because you understand that's how businesses work. So I don't understand why you criticize gun channels when they make a commercial. And you also don't go, well, I guess Ford's the best truck in the world if you watch their commercial. You don't go, well, I don't see how every other truck stays in business because Ford's obviously the best. You understand that's a commercial. So for people who go, well, I don't like these channels that lie, they're not lying, they're making an advertisement. It's up to you to be an educated consumer and be able to know the difference between a review and an advertisement. Just like it's up to you to be able to know the difference between a review and a presentation. That's on you. There's nothing wrong with giving any of those things. The only thing wrong is when you aren't smart enough to know the difference. So don't lay it on the gun channels. That's on you as a consumer. Be an educated consumer. Now, when shills become bad is when they start doing things that they know are false, when they'll say anything that they don't even truly believe for money, or they'll shill for an organization that isn't working in our best interest. Like anyone right now that's shilling for Springfield Armory. There's no way they believe that crap story Springfield Armory gave. I mean, I'm sure there's some marks that actually believe it, but there's a lot of people that are shills. They're out there just selling it because they want to sell it for that company. And a shill is a bad thing to be. It's like a snake oil salesman. That's one way to think of a shill, that kind of a shill. Like the NRA. People who sell the NRA and don't believe everything they sell about it, that's a shill. And, to be honest, I have no problem with really any of these categories except for shills if they're being dishonest. And my biggest fear is now, the way YouTube is going, the way AdSense is going, the way the NRA is behaving, etc. There's a lot of chance right now that a lot of previously good gun channels are going to become shill channels. And that is another video entirely. My nose has been itching for all that. Ew. That was miserable.